Hello and welcome to Car File. Now on this week's programme we're looking at two of the most famous Swedish car companies in the world. In fact I think they're the only Swedish car companies, that's Volvo and Saab. And one thing that both companies do extremely well is estate cars.
Now that is the kind of Saab that I want. It's got guns, which is a plus, and it's got jets, which is another. Mind you, it probably costs about 500 million quid, which is quite a lot, even on finance. It's ironic that just as Saab's #1 competitor Volvo choose to launch the S80 as a saloon only, there is no estate, Saab make a return to the load-lugging sector after an absence of 20 years with a 9.5 estate. Mind you, I might still get to have a go in the jet version because Saab chose to launch their new estate at RAF Leeming. Saab say that they've designed the car with an eye to practicality before pure image, but despite that, I think it looks fantastic. They're all new pillars from the rear passenger door back, but the sloping C-pillar, well, that's typically Saab. And it also gives the 9.5 quite a sporty, rakish look, which is just as well, because size-wise, the 9.5 estate falls somewhere between the tiny little sporting estates, the one where you have to trade in the Retriever for a Jack Russell to fit the dog in the back, and the full-blown load luggers. There are some nice luxury touches too, but those as well are designed with an eye to practicality first. For instance, these roof rails, they're not an adornment, they are real. They will support a load if you find that the boot space isn't enough. And there are some nice touches in the boot space. Open the tailgate, these red lights at the top are a repeater of the tail lights, which means if you're loading at night and you obscure them, people can see you, you're safer. And these white lights are here to illuminate the whole of the load area, make sure you don't trip over anything or step in a puddle. So, on the road, is the big Swede a turnip? Saab make no wild claims about the 9.5 estate being a sports car, but they do point out that they spent a lot of time and a lot of effort making it handle as well as a saloon car on the road, and it's time well spent, because it does. It's very poised on the road, it's actually a very pleasurable drive. There's none of the boomy noise that's usually associated with an estate car either, as a result of the big space at the back. It's very well insulated from that. It's available from launch with two engines, the 2-litre and the 2.3. That's 150 and 170 brake horsepower. Both are Saab's light pressure turbos. Very soon it'll be joined by the 3-litre V6, that's an asymmetric twin turbo, and should make it a bit of a stonker. Now, I have said this before, but that's never stopped me from saying anything again, so I shall. Saab, for me, will always be associated with bearded people in goat wool jerseys whose diet means, well, put it this way, you wouldn't want to share a car with them on the school run in the morning. Vegetarians. I'm not being cruel to Saab when I say this, and it's certainly not a reflection on their current range. It's simply that when I was at school, the Saabs I remember from them were all kind of beige, or maybe orange, and blobby in shape. And in updating the childhood memories of the likes of me, Saab do have a bit of a problem in that most of the cars from then are still around today. Building a car that lasts forever can be a bit of a double-edged sword for a manufacturer. It's great to boast about the fact that cars go on for millions of miles, but anybody trying to sell a product whose lifespan is measured in millennia faces a bit of a problem in persuading people to come back and buy another one. That's why British Leyland invented the concept of built-in obsolescence. Sell somebody a car that's good for 40,000 miles, and then sell them another, and another and another. You'd need carbon dating to pinpoint the original birth date of some of the Saabs still around today. But back to the present. Life is about compromises, ask any American president, and the Saab 9.5 estate compromises very well. It mixes the better qualities of a sporty estate with the genuine practicality of its more cumbersome competitors. OK, as a drive it doesn't tear the ground up, but there won't be any skins left on rice puddings, and it does drive much like a saloon. At a shade under £24,000 for the 2-litre engine version and a shade under £27,000 for the 2.3, it competes very well against the likes of Audi, BMW and Volvo, the immediate competitors, on price, as it does on specification. But if you are looking for performance in a small, sporty estate, then I'd say take a look at something like Subaru's Legacy, which is more powerful, it's actually cheaper in some instances, and of course it does have the advantage of that permanent four-wheel drive. But if you really want to go Swedish, then the Saab 9.5 estate is definitely worth a look.
So the Saab 9.5 looks great in principle, but how does it compare head to head with Volvo's V70?
A jet fighter might be a long way from a load-lugging estate car, but this particular one can just about claim to be related, because it can trace its ancestry back to a time when Saab decided to use up their spare staff by turning them from making aircraft to building cars. And as a result, their cars have always boasted the highest levels of engineering, as well as being slightly, well, quirky in a Swedish way. Then there's the second of our Swedish offerings, the Volvo. It can trace its ancestry back to, well, an old wardrobe, probably from the looks of most old Volvos. But they have built a very well-deserved reputation for constructing the most durable, long-lived and practical of estate cars on the market. Cars that have, over the generations, carried families on holiday, antique traders and travelling salesmen. And like the Saab, they seem to go on forever and ever. In some cases, the only way to age an old Volvo or a Saab is to cut a slice off the exhaust pipe and count the rings. The Saab has been on sale for about a year now. The Volvo went on sale only recently, and the difficulty for fans of Swedish cars is going to be in choosing between the two of them, because they are very much pitched head to head in the marketplace. It's a case, if you like, of how do you like your Swede, sir? The first thing to hit you when you get into the Saab is just how comfortable these seats are. You really do get the impression that this aircraft is club class. Thank you very much. And that impression is bolstered by the presence of this little card that we find in the car, giving us details of the car's safety. But I keep expecting to face backwards and address my passengers for where the exits are in case of emergency. Or is that just me? Good news too when it comes to the amount of kit, because they certainly don't let you down. There's more than enough luxury touches in here. The climate control is particularly easy to use and very effective. And there are some nice little touches as well, like this cup holder. Wow! Somebody's put some real thought into that. It's not just a throwaway item. For my money, certainly it's the most stylish of the two interiors, and typically Saab, with the instruments banked in front of you. You feel very much like you're in control of an aircraft. And one other typical Saab feature as well, the ignition key mounted down here on the transmission tunnel. They've always done it, and it looks like they always will. It does mean you can lock the gearbox as well. Oh, hello. Do I hear the sound that could mean the captain's put the seatbelt warning lights on? Must be getting ready for takeoff. The Saab actually has the smaller engine of the two. It's just 2.3 litres and only 4-cylindered, compared to Volvo's 5 cylinders and 2.4. But the Saab is actually more powerful. It has an extra 30 bhp and it does feel faster than the Volvo. There's barely any turbo lag in here, and that's not surprising really, because Saab have been fiddling around with turbos since the 70s, so you'd expect them to get it right. In fact, the only interruption in the acceleration comes from waiting for kickdown on the automatic gearbox. The best way to enjoy your 9.5 estate is to sit back, calm and unruffled. Think club class again on a long intercontinental flight. Just reserve that acceleration for takeoff and maybe a bit of overtaking. But be warned, when you do come to land, you might find the brakes are a bit of a surprise. It's not that they're not there, they are, but you will have to give the pedal a bit of a prod. There's good news in store for rear seat passengers in the Saab, because there's loads of room and it's really comfortable as well. And then the boot space, well, it's every bit as cavernous as you would demand in any estate car in this class. But there's more to it than that, because we get this extremely nifty hard luggage cover, and then this very clever system of nets and these movable anchor points to which you could tie up ships if you really felt the need to. All well and good, but surely, if it's practicality and space you want, it's got to be a Volvo. It's been that way for hundreds of years. Well, yes and no. For a start, this luggage cover, forget it, horrible thing. There are anchor points, but they're only in the corners. There aren't a whole rack of them like in the Saab. There is a nice little space here, good news for smugglers, as long as customs are particularly gullible. And that's about it. In the back, well, plenty of space for your passengers here. And again, it's nice and comfortable, but there could be a bit of a disappointment in store here compared to the 9.5. Everything's in here, it's just not as engaging or as special feeling as in the Saab. Now, I'm actually quite a fan of these simple, solid slabs of controls that Volvo seem to be turning out, but I know plenty of people find it, well, rather Euro bland. They have been to the same school of cup holder manufacture, though. Look at this beauty. Yeah, it's the kind of thing that would finally make you talk in a torture chamber. Whatever you say. So, despite those extra cubes, the Volvo loses out on power, and it does feel quite a lot slower than the Saab. It's another light-pressure turbo, and this time there is turbo lag. In fact, that seems to be the only effect of it. The turbo basically flattens the bottom end and brings no particular benefits. So it loses out in terms of power. It loses out as well when it comes to the seating position for the driver and the passenger. The seats feel flabby. They're nowhere near as firmly padded and ergonomically shaped as those of the Saab. So more points down there. Then all of a sudden the Volvo starts to claw back points, and it does it in a most un-Volvo-like way. Because chuck this big barge through a series of corners and you'll be amazed. It goes round them really well, really fast. It feels glued down. The chassis is extremely well sorted for a car of this size. To chuck an estate car through a series of bends, this has got to be the one. When it comes time to draw things to a halt though, be warned again. Unlike the Saab, when you have to give the brakes a hefty prod, do the same in this and you'll be pulling your eyeballs back out of the air vents. It stops immediately. If anything, they are far too fierce. It's very difficult to be sensitive. Great news in an emergency, bad when you pull up 30 feet short of a junction. So, rather than being just a straightforward battle between two very similar cars, it's become apparent that each of these is going to appeal to really a very different buyer. In essence then, it boils down to this. If you need an estate car capable of hustling along your favourite stretch of B-road with the biggest payload on board, then the Volvo is your thing. But if you want a cross-continental tourer with a wonderful burst of acceleration and that cosseting ride, it's got to be the 9.5. It wins as well in terms of build quality and arguably style. So that's it, the Saab emerges top Swede. Just.
Well, that's it for part one, but join us after the break when we go all executive and see how the Saab 9.5 compares against Volvo's sleek S80. We'll see you soon. Hello and welcome back to Carfile. Now the Volvo and the Saab are both quite sensible cars, so for our 9.5 S80 comparison we need a sensible presenter. Cue Ian Royle.
Now, let me introduce you to two sexy Swedish babes. No, I'm not talking about the two girls from Ace of Base, nor, for those of you who like nostalgia, Agnetha or Anna-Frid from ABBA. So where are these two sexy Swedish babes? Well, they're here. Yes, the latest offerings from Saab and from Volvo. Now, neither of these Swedish companies were particularly well known for producing sexy cars, but they've come up trumps here, the 9.5 and the more recently introduced S80. Just look around either car and what you won't get is a boxy image. No, we all remember the Volvos of the 1980s and 90s with those huge bumpers, those now thankfully gone. Both cars have graceful lines, swooping curves, and look like they're ready to join that top executive club whose membership is dominated at the moment by BMW, Mercedes and Audi. It is a difficult club to join. Both these cars are but a whisker away from it. Now the Saab rather surprisingly has the more chunkier styling than the Volvo. It also has some unique trademarks like the centrally mounted key switch. Of course they still use turbocharged engines. The Saab is somewhat different from other executive cars. It's almost one out on its own. They also still have this great cockpit design which they push a lot in their television adverts. You can put a pilot in here, they say, and they wouldn't feel out of place. Everything is neat, close at hand and easy to use, the radio, the air conditioning controls. Now both the S80 and the 9.5 are almost identical in exterior size. Interior wise though, for me, the Saab 9.5 loses a little bit, particularly for backseat occupants who won't find as much legroom as they do in the S80. The 9.5 comes with a choice of 3 engines, all of course turbocharged. You get the base 2-litre model, this 2.3, and a 3-litre V6. This 2.3 produces 170 brake horsepower. Acceleration is pretty good, around about 9 seconds 0 to 60, top speed of 140 miles an hour. Now, it does use a drive-by-wire throttle. Linked with this 4-speed automatic box makes acceleration very swift and rapid. The suspension is supple, and that gives a very pleasant ride at most speeds and on most types of roads. But if you fancy pushing it hard when you find that nice bit of country lane that we're all looking for at some stage, well, you may find it a bit wallowy going around corners with a bit too much body roll too. Both the Saab and the Volvo are front-wheel drive, whilst its 2 main rivals, the 5 Series and E-Class, rear-wheel drive. But under normal driving, you'd be really hard-pressed to discover the difference. The Saab is a very relaxing car to drive. Some of its components, I hasten to add, are from the General Motors network, including a Vectra-based suspension. Equipment levels are high, with items like air conditioning, a quality stereo CD system, alloy wheels and dual airbags all standard. The Swedes certainly know how to offer a quality, well put together package. Prices for the 9.5 start at £23,000, rising to the Griffin V6, top of the range, at £30,000. Interestingly as well, Saab have finally decided to fit traction control, and it's now standard on all 9.5s. So the 9.5 really impresses quite a lot. One advantage as well, if you need that load carrying capacity, is you can have a 9.5 estate. You can't have an estate at the moment, unfortunately, with the Volvo S80, but does it drive as well as the Saab? The S80's ride is supple and smooth, gliding over all but the worst surfaces. Handling for such a big car is also excellent. This is a 2.4-litre engine in this particular model, 170 brake horsepower. It's rather dull at low speeds, but rev it hard, open it up and push it right the way round to the red line, and you can find yourself having a great deal of fun and making very rapid progress. Now, it's a very comfortable interior. Everything is fairly well laid out, apart from 1 or 2 little oddities like the fog light switch, which is hidden right down here over on the right-hand side of the steering wheel, and a great extra in this car, which is the satellite navigation system, which took me an age to find out where the controls for it are. They're actually hidden behind the steering wheel here. Once you've found them though, they're easy to use. The seating position in the S80 gives you an amazingly wide range of options. There are 2 controls down on the side of the seat for tilt and forward positions, which takes you a while to actually get into just the right position, but once it's there, it's a lovely cosseting feel. The dashboard as well on the S80 reminds me very much of the 5 Series. That swooping curve there, particularly around the passenger area, is straight out of the 5 Series, surely. You get a few different engines to choose from in the S80. There's a 2.4 140 brake horsepower, which for me would be very underpowered for this size of car. There's also a turbo diesel 2.5 engine, and if you want something really fast, well, the one to go for is the 2.8 T6, which will set you back about £37,000, but boy, would it be worth it for all that speed and all that power. It is a fast machine. One interesting thing that Volvo have also decided not to do is come up with what we always know Volvo for, a large estate. There are no plans, so we're told at the moment, for an estate version of the S80. Saab do one for the 9.5, so surely it's bound to come for the S80. You would certainly think so. Despite the enormous popularity of Volvos over the years, you can't really imagine the S80 being actually designed by Volvo, but of course it has, and it's an important car for them. There's always been a big Volvo. Unfortunately, at the moment, there's no estate, but we'll see. Volvo's design director, Brit Peter Horbury, and his team are responsible for the great style of cars like the S80 and the C70 coupes. The S80 takes its cues from a concept car shown in Paris back in 1992. The brakes are excellent, with discs all round and reinforced with anti-locking and electronic brake distribution. If you're a Volvo fan, you'll certainly like the S80, but it's perhaps difficult to imagine a user-chooser, as they're now called, people with their own budget who can choose their own company car, perhaps spending £25,000 to £30,000, picking an S80 over, say, a 5 Series or a Mercedes E-Class. If I were to take off all the badges from both of these cars and ask you to recognise them, you'd probably spot the 9.5 as being a Saab. Whether you'd spot the S80 as being a Volvo, I'm not so sure, which is testimony to the way that Volvo have come on leaps and bounds. Now, both of these vehicles are worthy enough to join that exclusive club in the executive sector currently dominated by the Germans. The S80 is more a cruiser. It's well built, but in my opinion let down by its driving dynamics. The Saab feels more sure-footed on the road, it handles better, it's more responsive, and has a slightly better interior. So if I had to choose between the two, which is a difficult choice, the 9.5 would be my choice, but only just.
Well, that's it for this week's Car File, but join us next week when we go from estate cars to little cars, as it's the turn of the Super Mini.
Slight problem here. You see, the thing is, we had everything set up to film the new Mini. And then we saw the size of the thing. It ain't so mini after all, it's too big, it won't fit. Over 40 years went by between Alec Isigonis penning the design for the original Mini on a paper napkin and somebody at modern-day BMW saying, hold on guys, I got a great idea. So here we are in a square in Italy. It's a piazza, Richard, it's a piazza. Oh good, Italian job jokes.
Yeah.